You're listening to the RTI Press Pass powered by Rocky Top Insider.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back into the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass podcast. Today is Tuesday, September 30th, the final day of the month, coming to you a day earlier than we normally do, but that is because Tennessee is on a bye week, which I know I'm personally excited about, able to downshift a little bit before the next stretch of the SEC season comes along. I am joined by my two great co-hosts, Ryan Shumpert and Ryan Sylvia, who in their own respective ways are both gearing up for the MLB playoffs with their attires today. You can see it on camera with Shumpert. You could see it on camera previously with Sylvia before he threw on his jacket. It's still there. He is still Boston strong. Hey, good morning to you both. Happy open week. Gearing up for the MLB playoffs today. I believe, Shump, you got one just in a couple hours as we sit here and record right now.
Yeah, the Cubs played a second game of the day, which I'm there's a Cubs guy I follow. He's like a fan that has podcasts, and I find him generally informative. He pitched at Illinois, but he's been big. He gets big in the weeds of the takes of like what's good for scheduling, and this one makes more sense. But he's all over day game. Great Padres, the internal clock coming from California. They're playing even earlier, so that part's good. But it sucks for me. It sucks for a schedule of trying to watch. But alas, I'm excited.
Yeah, Red Sox in the sweet zone. We got the 6 p.m. Eastern over in New York City. So that's get to watch a couple stress-free games, get those under the belt, watch the Cubs. I'll pull for your Cubbies, and then we get the Red Sox Yankees, which is just either the best 3 days of my life or complete and utter total nightmare if they do drop this wild card series. So we'll in 2 days or 3 days from now, I will be a changed man either way.
Sylvia, in your case, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I'll pull for you guys, and you guys are obviously my friends here. You used a lot of luck last weekend. Now, maybe it's one of those things where luck resets at the end of the month, right? And your cup is refilled, and you have a new set of luck to pull from. But between you and I sitting there at the Tuscaloosa Buffalo Wild Wings in the hotel that we were at and watching Virginia upset Florida State in a classic, one of the great field stormings of all time, Squirrel White at the bottom of the pile in that one. And then also Boston clinching their spot in the playoffs. I believe those two things happened within 5 minutes of each other. And then also the team that you covered, the Tennessee Volunteers, escaping Starkville, Mississippi with an overtime win. A lot of luck in one weekend. Are you worried at all? It's kind of it needs to be replenished going into this baseball series.
That is a good spin zone if the Red Sox do lose tonight, where new month. It's not October baseball yet. If the Red Sox lose tonight, it's not October baseball yet. So who cares? And then, going into tomorrow, it's a big deal. For transparency, yes, both my parents went to Virginia. So, you got to see, you got to hope your parents' team does well when they got Florida State at home. So we were excited to watch that in Tuscaloosa. That was an unbelievable ending too. And of course, it feels like, Tennessee's everywhere. So Squirrel White's at the forefront of the field rush, literally, where he's the first guy that they encounter. But, I mean, it seems like unbelievably it went well for him, as well as it could have gone. Like, he seems to be fine.
He popped up.
Believe. Like, I can't believe that.
I have no idea. I have truly no idea how he escaped that pile, unless there were just some Virginia students who helped him up and made sure that, he wasn't trampled in the process. Otherwise, I have no idea. I mean, it was a true floodgates have opened. Feet are stampeding onto the field. No barrier, no wall to jump over. And Squirrel White is on his bum on the field. Still to this day. No idea how he got it, but it seems like he did.
I thought about this too, literally yesterday, where I was thinking about, I saw Rick, you put up bowl projections where people have Tennessee playing, and if they don't make the playoffs, they're going to play, one of the better teams that also didn't make the playoffs. Tennessee's projected to finish towards the, I guess inside the top 25. So you're going to play a decent team, most likely in a bowl game. Florida State's been a really popular pick for a lot of people, which of course you see the ties to Elijah Herring and Jason Jenkins, Squirrel White, and everyone over there. There's not an off chance that it could be Virginia too. Virginia's schedule is pretty easy, and if they drop 1 or 2 more games, they could still be, one of the top teams in the ACC. And you got to look at, the tie-ins and things like that to see exactly what that would end up actually looking like. But there is a non-outside chance that incredible game on Friday night is a team that Tennessee could play, whether that is maybe in the playoffs against a Florida State team or if that is just a bowl game.
Now, I will say this: I think that Tennessee would boat race Virginia. Now, Virginia did use the run. Virginia did use the run against Florida State, and I think that's where Tennessee is about to find some improvement. We'll get into more of that later during our Tennessee conversation, but I think that would be one of those ugly games.
Well, I would love Tennessee in both of those games, whether it was Florida State or Virginia. I would have no issue picking Tennessee to win either of those.
Yeah, I would agree. Hey, as we sit here right now, we'll be talking about Tennessee. Obviously, a bye week coming up, so no preview for an upcoming game or anything. 2 weeks from today, Tennessee will take on 2 weeks from this past weekend, Tennessee will take on Arkansas back in Neyland Stadium. Obviously, a potential revenge game from last year's loss. We're going to get into just what we thought about that Mississippi State game, maybe some of our closing thoughts on that, where Tennessee stands after these first 5 weeks of the college football season, and much more. But just to mention a couple of quick things off the top, and the RTI Lowdown is doing great. Thank you for everybody who has been listening and watching their show. Obviously, the show that Bob Baskerville and Chris Lowe host on a Sunday night. This weekend will be a fun one. Now, I'm not going to spoil anything about it, but this weekend is going to be a fun one. So make sure to set those alarms for 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern time on Sunday night for the next edition of the RTI Lowdown over on the RTI YouTube channel and wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Pancakes and Bacon. I know Kyler Kerbyson, the VFL, and Reed Bacon had a lot to say after this past weekend's win over Mississippi State. Those boys went for almost 2 hours. I mean, we will not be going for 2 hours today, but if you really want to hear a couple of guys who can break things down, as Russell Smith would say, to levels beyond scientific, Kyler and Reed do a great job at just looking at every aspect of the game, and especially having Kyler's perspective as a former player, I think really, really impacts that show and really makes it a must-watch for a lot of Tennessee fans. That one as well, you can find over at the Rocky Top Insider YouTube account and wherever you find your favorite podcast. And the last shout-out we want to mention before we get into the main meat of the podcast today is that obviously continue checking out our great the work of our great friends over at WATE Channel 6. You can find our podcast. You can find the RTI Lowdown. You can find other great local and sports contents over at the WATE 6 Plus Smart TV app. I know I myself have an Amazon Fire TV. It didn't take long at all for me to find that app, download it to my TV, and boom, just like that, I have great access to some extra content going on from WATE, including where I like to watch the RTI Lowdown. I'll be frank here. I do upload it. I do upload the show from my own computer, but then I like to sit down on the couch, put the fellas on the big screen, and watch a little RTI Lowdown. Ramon Foster was the guest this past week. It was Jeff Levy 2 weeks ago. And again, a big episode with a big-time guest coming up on Sunday's show. Won't reveal anything past that. We will do that in due time. But that is some of the quick housekeeping notes as well. Obviously, you can find all of our content over on RockyTopInsider.com, and make sure you follow us going into the bye week and beyond as Tennessee football gets ready to restart the SEC slate coming up in just less than 2 weeks against Arkansas. Speaking of Arkansas, the head hog is gone. Sam Pittman, after a brutal loss to Notre Dame, that was one of the big questions going into the season just on their side of things. Was Sam Pittman going to make it through? Were they going to give him kind of the courtesy of finishing out the season? That's what my expectation was. I think it was for other people as well. But man, you lose a game like that at home where it looks like you maybe have just lost the team in the process. That's a tough one to overcome. The head hog is gone in Fayetteville. And boy, Bobby P is back. I know he's been back as a coordinator role, but Bobby P is back in the interim head hog chair. That is something wild that I barely remember from my early days watching college football. If you take people who are older than us, they might have a much better memory of that, but it's still certainly one of the more wild situations that college football has found itself in. Bobby P back leading the Arkansas Razorbacks. And their first game will be right here in Knoxville against the Volunteers.
Yeah, I still remember Ryan Mallett slinging around that pill
Ooh,
in Fayetteville. I specifically remember really 2 games I think I remember. Them giving Alabama they lost both these games. I think in Alabama in 2010, I guess it'd been 2010, they played a great game, and then Auburn, the Cam Newton year, which I think was 2010 too. They lost that game like 65-50, just like a complete 2000 teens Big 12 level track shootout between Arkansas and Auburn. So, yeah, I don't know, Sylvia, your thoughts, like them Petrino like firing the defense coordinator and some other defensive
yeah.
staffers. That seemed kind of odd to me. I mean, their defense sucked. Don't get me wrong,
Yes.
but it just seems weird to lessen your staff in the middle of the season. Like, what's really going to change?
I saw both sides of it where on one hand, yeah, the defense was abysmal and that they just got ran over in that Notre Dame game. They did not have a solution on a single drive during that game. So yeah, it was not a good defensive side of the ball. At the same time, that defensive coordinator was a nominee for what is it, the Broyles Award, given to the top coordinator or assistant coach in the country for the last 2 seasons. So he's clearly doing some things right, and he was a big part of what they did a year ago when they did beat Tennessee. Now, I think a lot of that is squarely on the shoulders of how bad Tennessee's offense was at times, but you do have to give credit to the other side as well, where they did limit what Tennessee was able to do and really kept Tennessee off the scoreboard for pretty much the entire game. So it's a tricky one because, yeah, I get at the same time, though, like, it's just been so bad. But now you're kind of getting some quit from the defense, I think. And the defense didn't look good, and they didn't look like they were energized in that game against Notre Dame. But now you've seen some active players on Arkansas like publicly be upset that their entire defensive staff is gone at this point. Essentially, like that's 3 key pieces of their defensive coaching staff that aren't there anymore. So to me, it just feels like a perfect storm for Tennessee. I see the other perspective of that as well, where usually when a coach gets fired, there's a bunch of juice. Everyone's excited. You know, the new guy comes in, he's going to empty the clip. And I fully expect Bobby Petrino to empty the clip against Tennessee. Whatever he has, he's going to try to get it out there when Tennessee and them square off. But man, it just does not feel, it feels like a team that's more, man, I understand he wasn't the best, but I love Sam Pittman and he was our guy and you just took our guy away. That kind of feels more like the vibe in that locker room right now than a rejuvenated like Virginia Tech, where they came out and they beat NC State for their first win of the year. I think that was a rejuvenated team that saw a fresh slate. I think this is more of a team that's like, man, I'm gonna miss Sam Pittman.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe.
At least on the defensive side, I guess. The offense.
Well, my thing, the defense, I don't care about talent. I don't care about coaching. You give up 7 touchdowns or 6 touchdowns on 6 drives in the first half, you're not playing hard. And you're an SEC team, you're just not playing hard. Like, so I don't know. It's hard for me to buy that. That would just be my pushback to that argument. It's like they weren't exactly playing hard for their head coach on Saturday.
Yes. Well, that's why I see both sides. Like, it's like the guys on social media and stuff that are like, man, you just fired our whole defense. It's like, well, you know, you clearly weren't doing well with him. So I mean, it's kind of going to be the result. But yeah, I just like, I don't think that side of the ball is going to magically get better, I guess, is where I'm at. Like, I don't think that it's the type of situation where you fire the head coach and that side, like I said, is rejuvenated and is like, all right, let's go out there. And I think that side might have a little more quit. Maybe the offense will be a different story and Taylor Green's dynamic, but it just feels like Tennessee's going to hang a million on them.
Here's my conspiracy theory, and the only really thing I have to say about Arkansas is if you're Bobby Petrino, you want that job moving forward, right? And Hunter Yurachek, when he made the decision to fire Sam Pittman, he did come out and say that we're going to be making a search and everything like that, but Bobby Petrino will be a part of that search. I mean, they went out of their way to say that at the very end. You look at the rest of Arkansas' schedule. At Tennessee, Texas A&M, Auburn, Mississippi State, at LSU, at Texas, Missouri. There's maybe one more win. If you can sneak one out against Auburn, if you can maybe sneak one out against Mississippi State, there's one more win in there. That's a 3-9 year, or at worst, it's a 2-10 type of year. If I'm Bobby Petrino, like that doesn't set me up well to get this job, right? If I'm Bobby Petrino and I want this job after Sam Pittman, I think I'm hoping that Sam Pittman makes it to the end of the season so that he can kind of shoulder the blame for a lot of what happened. Then Bobby can kind of come in as the knight in shining armor and say, hey, here's what I would do. maybe it's just a tactic to say, we had to get rid of everybody. Like, I need a blank slate to work with if I'm going to, be the head coach of this team. And maybe just kind of getting rid of House, maybe it gives him a little bit more opportunity or leverage to say, none of this was mine. This was all going bad in the first place. I want a fair shot at being able to lead this team. Again, that's kind of just big conspiracy theory for me. That's kind of just water cooler talk. But, that was one of my only ideas. Just going back to the idea that I do think that this is a tough position to be for an interim head coach who really wants that job, I would imagine, going into the next season and obviously the coaching search.
Yeah, I think he's still better off just getting an audition, and they've been so bad that I feel like that gives you, a little bit of leeway, like you said, of things being so bad. Like, if you just show some improvement, that's a decent argument. You find a way to win a couple close games, which it feels like Arkansas only did against Tennessee last year in like the last 2.5 seasons. Like, that feels like that was about the only close game that they won. So maybe that does it. To me, I mean, I think it's Rhett Lashley or Barry Odom. I'm hiring one of those two guys if I'm Arkansas, unless Petrino just looks awesome and turns the season around. I make those two say no.
Sorry, I'm not sure if Lashley takes the job.
I'm not sure he does either.
I'm sure Barry Odom will.
Summerall too, I'd imagine, is on their list.
I've heard Summerall talk around. Obviously, Alex Golesh is going to be tied to any Power 4 job that opens up right now. And I think for Tennessee's sake, you just don't want familiarity within the conference. So I think you would rather him go to a Virginia Tech or UCLA or anywhere but the SEC if he does take one of those other jobs, which I still am not fully convinced he will. We'll see how that season plays out as well. But yeah, I mean, it feels like it's all tracking to be Barry Odom, but at the same time, like, I just can't believe that would be that cannot be the best hire they have. That just feels, I don't know. It feels like if Tennessee went back to like Lane Kiffin, I guess would be like a comparison. Like, I don't know. I guess.
Yeah, I mean Lane Kiffin's like a top 10 coach in the country.
Yeah, I guess that's the difference though. Is Lane Kiffin?
And I like Barry Odom,
but it's just
I thought Barry Odom got a raw deal at Missouri. I was surprised he took the Purdue job. Like, to me, that's a horrible job. I'm sure they will not have a good season this year. I don't know. It's not the sexiest hire for Arkansas, and he probably shouldn't be the top guy on the board. But I feel like they can do a lot worse than him too.
Yeah, it's just I'm also like maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but like, what are the odds Hunter Yurachek's even making that hire right now? Like, it seems like there's nobody in Fayetteville that likes him.
Yeah,
like I think Hunter Yurachek. I think he's running a clinic on how to make the job more unappealing than it probably is. I mean, I was sent a tweet yesterday, and this comes from Inside Arkansas. I guess he was asked if Sam Pittman was set up financially to set up to succeed financially. He said Coach Pittman did not have the resources he needed to compete in this conference. This also comes like 2 weeks after, Hunter Yurachek's previous comments about Arkansas, again, not being financially able to sort of compete for a championship and things like that. I just wonder if, the next coach who does go there, if he's saying, hey, what sort of financial backing do I have? And what does Walmart say? And what does, Tyson Chicken say? And what does the Dino Nugget man say? How much are they actually going to be involved in this thing? Hunter Yurachek, it just continues to make it seem like there's not enough funds going into football. And I would feel like that would need a change for somebody legitimate to go over there.
Yeah, it just certainly doesn't seem like a great spot. Like you hit the nail on the head with the Yurachek stuff, and commitment just doesn't seem great there. And I think that's what hurts me for Rhett Lashley. I mean, he's an Arkansas guy. He played for the Hogs. He started his coaching career for the Hogs, but it's hard to think right now where SMU is at. That it's you're getting to the college football playoff would be easier at Arkansas than it would be.
Feels like Yurachek is just more concerned about John Calipari or Dave Van Horn bringing a championship to Fayetteville than he thinks is realistic in football. But for right or wrong. So, anyways, that was a big tangent on Arkansas. Let's get back to the Tennessee side of things. Obviously, that's who Tennessee is going to face next week. We'll be able to talk more about Taylon Green and the Razorbacks next week. But let's go ahead and talk a little bit about Tennessee and just where things stand through 5 weeks heading into the bye week right now. 4-1. I think that's where we all expected Tennessee to be going into this point in the season. Obviously, win over Syracuse, East Tennessee State, UAB, and Mississippi State. The loss to Georgia. For me, it's like the loss to Georgia I didn't see being as competitive as it was. I also did not necessarily see the game against Mississippi State being as competitive as it was. So I think things kind of even out in a weird way to where we are standing at this point in the season. But Shump, I'll start with you. Just sort of how has Tennessee matched or met or fallen short in different ways? Just kind of where are they compared to the expectations that maybe you thought they were going to be at heading into this second part of the SEC schedule coming up after the bye week?
Yeah, I think from the Tennessee perspective, they're a lot better offensively than I thought. The receivers have played at a much higher level than I expected. Joey Aguilar has been better than I expected, and we've hit on it, but all the changes to Tennessee's offense, wanted to see them mix some things up and have some new answers for what defenses were throwing at them, and they have. Defensively, they're not as good as I expected. I think up the middle, the concern. I mean, the defense tackle is kind of hard to say how much of the concerns were valid because they've been injured there, so that's been a big part of the issues. I don't think at linebacker they have quite made the steps forward that I thought they might, especially from a depth standpoint. And then safety, I think, is that was an area that I didn't think they were going to be great, but I do think they still haven't been very good at. So those would be kind of the issues I'd point to on the defense. That we'll see how much of that can get fixed going forward, but they're certainly not the unit they were last year. I don't think they're going to be a top 10 unit nationally. Not that they're terrible. As a whole, to your point of the Georgia game was closer than expected, the Mississippi State game was closer than expected. I think for me, that's more of a takeaway. It's less about Tennessee and more about the conference. And I think Bob and Chris were talking about it on the lowdown yesterday. It feels like the NFL. It feels like a week-to-week league right now in the SEC, where there's just not a ton of separation in most of these teams, and especially when it's a team that's more talented going on the road. It feels like there's very few teams in the conference where you feel like they don't have a chance to give them a good game. The good news for Tennessee is I think one of the road games, if there's a team that's that, it would be Kentucky. So that's one of the good news for Tennessee. And Alabama game we know is going to be difficult. The Florida game I still maintain, even with Florida playing bad, that's going to be a very difficult game for Tennessee. A game that probably will, if Tennessee wins, will probably feel a lot like the Mississippi State game did, with a lot of back and forth. So that's kind of what I would say. Everybody to me feels very, very close, and there's going to be some blowouts. Certainly, I don't think it would surprise anybody if Tennessee blew out Arkansas, but more so than past years, I think I just expect most of these Tennessee games to be pretty competitive, and I would say that goes for most of the conference as a whole, not just Tennessee.
And I think that's why it sucks so much for Tennessee that they couldn't win that Georgia game, that you couldn't get the fourth down stop, that the Max Gilbert kick didn't go in, that you couldn't pull it out in overtime. It does feel like there's going to be so many coin flip type of games, or at least very highly competitive games, where dropping a game that you had such a good chance and should have won down the stretch just feels like a gut punch. And that obviously would have been a great win on your resume and help with seeding and everything that goes into the college football playoffs now. But I agree. The NFL, I think it was Chris Lowe said that, talking to a defensive coordinator or something, where this does feel the most like an NFL type of league than it ever has. And at the same time, it's tough for me right now to not drink a little bit of the Tennessee Kool-Aid. Like, the offense has looked so good, and the defense hasn't been great, right? They haven't been bad, but they haven't been great. They weren't as bad as it felt in the moment against Mississippi State, when you kind of let it rest and you go back and rewatch and you do those types of things, where it was a lot of short field that they gave up points. It was a lot of bend but don't break type of situations. They weren't given the best hand, and ultimately when it mattered the most, Mississippi State I think one of the things that isn't talked about enough from that game, not the fourth down stop at the goal line in overtime. Mississippi State had a chance to march down the field to win the game after Tennessee scored with the Joey Aguilar touchdown. The defense forced a 3-and-out and got the ball right back to Tennessee, who almost marched down themselves and scored. The fact that you're probably getting David Hobbs back now, he certainly seems like he's throwing the hints on social media that he's good to go. You have Jackson Moy back. Tremont McCoy seems like someone that could be back sooner than later. We'll see exactly what that looks like if he is good to go. If Tremont McCoy comes back and looks good, and David Hobbs comes back and looks like the David Hobbs that Rodney Gardner and his teammates were talking about in the preseason, I'm not saying it's going to be the 2024 defense, but it should be a pretty dang good defense. And if you pair that up with the offense that's looked as good as it is, I'm not saying they're going to win every game left on their schedule. Man, they're going to have a fighting chance to only drop one more, and you would think make the playoffs at 10-2.
Yeah, for sure. I think Yeah, I want to see Jermod McCoy against Arkansas really bad.
I need to see Jermod to fully be. If Jermod McCoy comes back against Arkansas and looks like 85%, 80% of what he was last year, it's like, all right, man, this team actually might be able to not necessarily, like I said, run the table, but you only drop one more game, you finish 10-2. We'll see how everything shakes out, but you should be in the playoffs at that point.
And that's also a compliment to just how good that Colton Hood has been.
Yeah, absolutely.
Colton Hood, everybody thought that he was a good player coming over from Colorado, and maybe some of his versatility could get mixed in. With Ricky Gibson going down as early as he did, Colton Hood being able to step up and basically turn into I'll refer to, I believe it was Kyle Renner of CBS Sports, a potential first-round NFL draft pick. I mean, the way that he's got, 2 touchdowns on the year? I think that's more than a couple of Tennessee's offensive guys. He has been phenomenal. And I love the swagger and the energy that he plays with. I think, Sylvia, you saw it, and maybe even you tweeted a video about it, but just after that Mississippi State game, just kind of going to the Mississippi State sideline and flexing, right? That's what you want your cornerbacks to do. That's the kind of ego or swagger that they have. I think being able to bring Jermon McCoy back, and again, like you said, even if that's a little bit limited at 80%, 85% until it gets worked back up, because of the way that Colton Hood has been playing, and because of the way that he's exceeded expectations, that's a testament to where that guy is right there about how good that could be.
And something
for sure.
Go ahead.
You go ahead, because my next point's going to slightly pivot.
Okay, I was just going to say it's something we talked about on the post-game podcast too, where that, like, getting Jermod McCoy back, if he is able to look really good, could help in the run game, which was, I think, the biggest issue against Mississippi State was how they got gashed on the ground at time. And not that Jermod McCoy is going to step up and be a run stopper, but just if you can trust him more than you can trust Ty Redmond in one-on-one coverage, because it seemed like Tennessee didn't want to go to that much after Georgia picked on Ty Redmond a little bit in that game against Mississippi State. Seemed like they wanted to sit in zones more and trust that. If Jermod McCoy is able to go out and play man coverage against some of the best receivers in the conference, and you get David Hobbs back up the middle, you would like to see maybe another step from the linebackers outside of Arian Carter, Edwin Spillman, Jeremiah Thielander. They haven't been horrible. Edwin Spillman's actually been pretty good, but if they could take a step up and be better in the run game and tackling the open field and stuff like that, I don't know. It just feels like if you can trust Jermod to lock down one of the sides and Colton keeps playing how he has, the defense it feels like maybe they got out of the early season troubles, and this could be a turning point once they get a few guys back.
Yeah, for sure. I think two things one thing of note and one thing I wouldn't necessarily hate seeing. Evan Spillman out-snapped Jeremiah Thielander on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
That, to me, was a necessary, needed change. I think we'll continue to head in that direction. I'm sure Thielander will continue to start, but I think Spillman will play more and more. To me, it's just like that. They find a fourth linebacker? Because it's been a lot of Jaden Harmon early in the season, some Ben Bolton, Jalen Smith played more snaps. They just haven't gotten great play from that fourth linebacker. Really, they haven't gotten great play from Thielander either. So, Aaron Carter's had a nice season. Spillman has been good in spurts, but I'd like to see a little bit more consistency there. And, I almost wonder, because Boo Carter played well, it feels like he's playing better at star as the season goes on, and maybe he gets a little bit more comfortable with what they're asking him to do in some of the calls and just understanding what he's being asked out of the defense. We haven't seen it at Tennessee. I would love to hear that Jalen McMurray is getting some work at safety this week. Would love it. I think Idris Fruit's going to be a good player in time. I think Caleb Beasley can be a good player in time. It's not like Andre Turrentine's an all-SEC guy. He kind of is what he is, which is fine. Tennessee needs better safety play. I don't know. Maybe Jalen McMurray. I know he played there at Temple. He obviously hasn't played there in Knoxville. So I don't know if it's unrealistic to think that's any sort of a possibility. But when it just comes to getting your best 5 defensive backs on the field, I feel like that would be a way to do that. But I'm not necessarily holding my breath. That's just something I'd like to see.
Yeah, it's not something that I would anticipate, like you're saying, but it is. They talk all offseason about how versatile and the cross training they do, and it just feels like we haven't seen too much of it. So you would think it would be something that maybe they could try, but I at the same time, I still feel like what we're probably going to see is Jalen McMurray starting at star, and then maybe the 66-33% snap count split between McMurray and Boo Carter starts to trend a little bit more in Boo Carter's favor to evening up. And then But it is. You don't want to take Jalen McMurray off the field because he's been good. So if you do want to get Boo Carter more snaps, it is directly going to cut into Jalen McMurray unless you try him somewhere else. And obviously he played cornerback last year, but if they were going to try to slide him back out to corner, it would have been these last few games without Ricky and Jermod when you were trusting just on Ty Redmond and Colton Hood. So I'm not holding my breath there either. It is an interesting thing to bring up. And then just going back to the linebackers, yeah, Edwin Spillman has been really good. I shouldn't have lumped him in, I guess, with the Jeremiah Thielander, who I don't think Jeremiah Thielander has been bad. I just don't think he's been good. He's just been okay. Edwin Spillman's been good, especially considering his age. So I wouldn't hate him, essentially starting, even if he isn't the first guy on the field. And then the other thing is, I think he said Jalen Smith, which is acceptable.
No, I didn't say Jalen Smith.
Jordan Burns. That was surprising to
Burns.
me. He was the fourth linebacker, and they didn't go to the freshman at all because that just hasn't been what we've seen. I don't know if that's a health thing early in the season for him or what that was, because he just wasn't in the rotation really at all early. And then he just kind of got thrust into action, which I didn't hate because the linebackers weren't tackling well in that game. But he is just a curious case for me, I guess, as the season goes on. Because it's like, what are you expecting from him at this? Is he going to play a bunch going forward now? Maybe I don't know about a bunch. Like, I don't know. I'm just curious.
He played 4 snaps against ETSU, 8 against UAB, and then 13 on Saturday against Mississippi State. So
yeah. Well, and my question with the secondary as well is that, the season opener, Tennessee's played 3 legit games so far. The season opener, to me, it's kind of in a category of its own because you're starting out so many things. The other 2 games, both being SEC games, they've both been overtime games. What does potentially the rotations look like if, Tennessee is kind of cruising into the fourth quarter with a 14-point lead, maybe even a 17-point lead, or at least a 10-point lead? Does anything look a little bit different? Do they try to get some more rotations in if these games haven't been, heavyweight punches that are being thrown back and forth? You take a punch, you got to throw a punch. You take a punch, you got to throw a punch. Again, maybe that's just kind of out of my weight class to continue using the boxing references, but that's just kind of something I've wondered about. Just again, Tennessee's been 2 big overtime fights in their 2 SEC games. So, how does that maybe change things up as far as the defensive line goes? Just to kind of circle back to something you said a minute ago. Yeah, Tennessee's defense, I think, certainly at times has been underwhelming. I don't think that's where we're going to close the season having the same conversation. I do think that a lot of that has been injury related. Getting Jackson Moy back this week, I think, was a big step in the right direction. And then David Hobbs. I'm using my phone, so I can't go back and look at it right now. I did screenshot it. Maybe one of you has the exact kind of caption. But he did put out an Instagram story. I guess it was on sometime on Monday because it was still active on Tuesday morning. Maybe it said go time. Again, don't quote me on any of those things.
Go time.
Said go time. Okay. So maybe it's a little cryptic that he's ramping back
He
up.
said just go time.
He said go time. So, and then you guys have already talked in length about Jermod, and I agree with everything there. So I just, the tackling, maybe that is one thing that it's like, okay, well, you still need to tackle a little bit better. But I don't think that we'll be sitting here towards the end of the season. As long as health kind of stays trending in the right direction, you don't lose somebody big like a Bryson Easton or a Dom Bailey, or, God forbid for Tennessee, one of those 2 guys have already been hurt. I don't necessarily think that's the conversation that we'll be having at the end of the year as well, that, Tennessee had 12 games of underwhelming run defense. So got to tackle a little bit better. I think that's absolutely true. And that's something that, who was it? Colton Hood has said after the game. But, I think that getting these injuries back does put Tennessee in a much better position to get back to where they wanted to be.
Something I will say too on both fronts, because I don't think Tennessee's run the ball quite as well as we would have expected either. Though I will say one from that, I think it's just natural. The reason we always thought Tennessee's run offense would be great is to wide splits. Well, they're not running the wide splits anymore. So I think it's only natural that the run offense is a little bit worse. There's more guys, if not in the box, at least near the box and able to come up and make plays that there just wasn't when Tennessee was running the wide splits. I do think, though, the point I would make on the run offense and run defense, both SEC games, late in games, when the game's on the line, they were good in both areas. I guess they did give up the big run in overtime against Georgia. But after that first drive of overtime, or first drive of the second half, when Tennessee got gashed on the ground against Georgia until overtime, the run defense was good. They ran the ball in that last drive to set up really well to set up the Max Gilbert field goal. And kind of the same thing in this game, where it felt like in the fourth quarter when Tennessee was rolling with their starting defensive linemen, they were putting their best guys on the field. They started stopping the run. And then We were talking about it, I think, on the post-game pod, that we felt like Tennessee maybe should have stuck with the run a little bit more in like the second and third quarter. Fourth quarter, overtime, it felt like they did that a little bit more. And it's not like they started gashing Mississippi State, but they did start having a little bit more success. So I think for those two questions, I think there is a little bit of, I don't know, credit or just reason for optimism, in the sense that when games have been on the line, they've kind of buckled down and done what they needed to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was in the fourth quarter, and Star Thomas maybe broke like an 8-yard run. Like, it was a nice run. And I leaned over to you and I said, Tennessee before that run was at 40 rushing yards for the game. I'm pretty sure that was in the early stage of the fourth quarter. That is an absurdly low number to be at that stage of the game. But maybe if they get the run game going, it'll be curious to see what that number finishes at. Finished at 131, and that adds a 25-yard run, right, from Deshaun Bishop. I guess you start the 25 and overtime.
25.
So, still over 100 yards in regulation. Then you obviously count that 25-yard rush from Deshaun. They did get the run game going at the end of the game. Like you said, it wasn't gashing. They weren't just running at will on Mississippi State's defense, which seems to have a pretty good run defense, and I will believe in that. We'll see exactly what that looks like as SEC play goes on and what other teams are able to do against it. But I think it is a pretty good run stop on that side. But I do think there is credit to what you said, where when the game was on the line, Tennessee was able to get the run game going. I think what's interesting about it, though, is, and I don't think this is shocking, it's been a lot of Deshaun Bishop. It's been a good amount of Star Thomas. Peyton Lewis is kind of just getting 1 or 2 drives a game, it feels like right now. And I think we all expected him to be the third man out if there was going to be a third man out, but it feels, I guess, much more like a 2-headed monster with some sprinkles of Peyton Lewis than like the true 3-headed monster maybe that was in 2023.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like Peyton Lewis is a bit, I don't know if limited is the right word, but it's like he doesn't catch the ball well out of the backfield. He blew his assignment on the play. Aguilar got sacked in the third quarter right before the interception. And it just doesn't feel like his vision's the best. And so that kind of leaves him to needing him, I think, because I do think he's a potential big play guy with his speed and his power. But when you're not doing the other things as well, like and the other two guys are playing well, you're just going to get less opportunities. So that's, to me, I think you kind of look in the margins. That's part of the reason he's kind of getting left out as the third guy.
Yeah, I would agree.
Let's go ahead and stick with the offense, unless there's anything to go back on from a defense perspective. Joey Aguilar right now, 1,459 passing yards. It leads the SEC. Obviously, that means that Chris Brazzell and Mike Matthews are going to be up there. I believe Brazzell is first in the SEC in receiving yards and touchdowns. Mike Matthews fifth in the SEC in receiving yards. And Braylon Staley is only, 48 yards behind Matthews as well. So I'd imagine that Staley is close to the top 10, if not in it himself. Joey Aguilar's 13 passing touchdowns is tied for the SEC lead with Diego Pavia. And then you've got those 5 interceptions as well. Shump, I think it was you who said maybe at some point during our travels over the weekend that, what was maybe your bold prediction that if Joey Aguilar's touchdown numbers were going to be over, then his interceptions were also as well, and vice versa. Tennessee has obviously proven to want to throw the ball with Joey Aguilar, and there have been some slip-ups. I mean, Braylon Staley falling against Georgia, I believe, was one. And obviously you have the 2 interceptions against Mississippi State this weekend who, tipped off the hands and just kind of went into a good, on one of the ones, the ball didn't go down and went straight up. And that allowed Mississippi State to get right under it and catch it for a turnover themselves. But Tennessee has obviously proven that they've wanted to throw the ball. And for maybe the biggest question mark going into the season, Joey Aguilar has performed in this offense. And it certainly hasn't been perfect. I still think that there's a lot of room to grow. But it has been an overwhelming surprise, I think, in a positive way, and just the way that things have been able to get done.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really necessarily a hot take or bold prediction, I guess, but the thing that I just said was that, and I pulled it up now, so we have the exact numbers. Our rundown. It was over under Joey Aguilar, 24.5 total touchdowns, over under 5.5 interceptions. And my take was he'll either be over in both and lower in both. And was I wrong? Because I said lower in both, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah,
you had the idea. I mean, you had the idea right. You had the idea.
Yeah. So I mean, look, he's 10 touchdowns through 5 games. He's 10 touchdowns away from hitting that over because he's got 2 rushing touchdowns. He's 1 interception away from hitting that over. And look, I think you would take that every time if you're Tennessee. You'd rather have the over. And I think that's the one thing I would say, too, just kind of going back to the starters conversation about like where Tennessee is compared to expectations. With the offense being better and the defense being worse, everything has made me feel better about Josh Heupel long term. I don't know if that necessarily means that this team is going to be better or get to 10 wins this year. I'm less convinced on that, though I think it's certainly possible, if not, over 50% likely. But you wanted to see for the offense head coach, you wanted to see the offense get right. You didn't want it to be 5 years in and say, well, the offense was great for 2 years and now it's not been very good for 3 years. You needed to feel like if this program was, I don't want to say moving in the right direction, but has the gas to become a national championship type winning program. You needed to feel like the offense could get back to being really good, and they've done that. I don't know where they will end up in the end of the year, but it'll certainly be in the top 20. I think it'll certainly be better than it's been the last 2 years, and some of that's come with Joey Aguilar throwing some interceptions, but I think you can live with it for the most part. It might lose them a game here at some point, but it's still, I think as a whole you can live with some of the risk.
Yeah, I would agree with the long-term outlook. Like, and this is a weird year too. Like the expectations were all over the place after the spring, obviously, when you lost your quarterback. And now obviously Joey Aguilar has been great and better than I think anyone expected, and probably better than a lot of people expect Nico to be if he did stay. And that's a whole nother conversation. But it didn't feel like going into the year, yeah, Tennessee's a national championship contender. Now they're probably a playoff contender if things go right and the defense looks really good. And it's kind of flipped over and they're still at those playoff expectations. But all that said, going forward, you're continuing to stack up talent at the skill positions and of course, in the trenches where it is so important. But you have a 5-star like Tristan Keys. You have multiple other receivers like a Salisi Moa and some other guys in the boat. You have the number one quarterback in Faison Brandon. Now, Tennessee fans have been down that road and seen that it doesn't always pan out, but you do have to expect Heupel is going to do whatever he needs to do to make sure he does have a good quarterback going forward, whether that is adding a transfer if one of those guys pans out. All that said, you're continuing to recruit really well. If you look at 247, I think they're sitting at the number 4 class, not composite, but just the 247 rankings. That is an elite recruiting class. If Heupel's able to adjust as he has from last year to this year, fit more of, I guess, a pro style type of offense. It's not a pro style offense, but it's a more pro style offense in terms of the splits and what they're asking receivers to do. It makes me feel better as well that he could stack up talent, and all of a sudden you are in those conversations to, maybe not win a national championship next year or the year after, but down the line, if you continue to build up the talent, it could come.
Yeah. Man, time to admit where I was wrong before the season. I was very skeptical about what Tennessee's wide receivers were going to look like based on the things that we saw at fall camp, just based on natural storylines about them all. We can't sit here and talk about the passing game and Joey Aguilar and how good as he's been without mentioning the wide receivers as well. Chris Brazzell has really flourished here in his second year in the program.
Unbelievable.
Mike Matthews has stepped up in a way. Braylon Staley has stepped up in a way. Joey Aguilar obviously likes Miles Kitselman. He continues to throw him the ball in short yardage situations. But really, I think the conversation starts and ends with Chris Brazzell and the way that he's been able to emerge and break out here. 31 receptions through the first 5 games, 531 yards. Probably could be pushing 600 yards if it wasn't for, at least one phantom offensive pass interference call that he's had so far. And then 7 touchdowns, which leads to SEC. And I get that there are a couple teams like Texas A&M, Alabama, Georgia, who haven't played their full 5-game slate yet. But I still think that Chris Brazzell is far enough ahead to where I'm like, yeah, I still think he'd be leading even if those teams were. I think by touchdown receptions per game, he's still in the lead there. He's not only been a big threat in the end zone and the red zone for what he's able to do to get into the field. But this is something that Joey Halsey talked about before the season, Tennessee trying to get that explosive play back. Well, you can scheme explosive plays and figure out how to get guys down the field all you want. It doesn't necessarily look like 2022 when Jalen Hyatt was running without, anybody in the same zip code as him. But the way that Chris Brazzell has been able to directly influence those explosive plays and give that back to the Tennessee offense, be able to put that back in Tennessee's pocket has been nothing short of remarkable. And Joey Aguilar has been able to hit him, but Chris Brazzell has been a big reason why Tennessee has been able to get back into that explosive play category. It is a huge reason why Tennessee leads the SEC in passing yards per game. and just phenomenal. So I'll admit that I was skeptical about what the receiver group could be. I think they've exceeded every single one of my expectations that I've had going into it, and that does count for Staley and Matthews as well. It's just that it feels like there's more to talk about with Brazel's breakout season, based on what we saw last year.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly been just phenomenal. And it's
That
yeah, I
catch
think
that
it's
he
just
made, that spinning catch. I'm sorry to cut that.
yeah.
What the hell was that? I have no idea how that was physically possible. And yes, I'm using physics here, like how the ball traveled to the spot that it was at. I thought that was a night. I mean, on Sunday night, I watched Dak Prescott make a remarkable throw, and the guy made a remarkable catch on the sideline. But Brazel did that through 2 defenders. That I have no idea how it happened, but it was truly next level stuff.
Yeah, and that's really leads to the point that I was gonna say. It's just like the number of difficult catches he's making, contested catches. Like he's going up and making tough plays. He's winning one-on-ones, as Josh Heupel likes to say. So I think that's, even to pass on 4th down, that, the game wouldn't have been over. Tennessee had all 3 timeouts, but certainly their win probability drops a ton if they don't convert that 4th down with 5 minutes to go. And, Aguilar's under pressure. Like, it was a good play by him, but a throw that was a little bit behind Brazel, and he makes what was not an easy catch. So, yeah, he's been fantastic. You want to see more consistency from Mike Matthews catching the football, but man, he's electric when he gets the ball in his hands. He's done a good job of getting open. And Brandon Staley had a bad game on Saturday against Mississippi State, but I still like what he's given Tennessee. You got to give him a lot of credit that, I feel like anytime Kelsey Pope talks to us, Tennessee's receivers coach, he talks about how important keeping the confidence of his group up is. And, Staley, for him to have a bad game and then to make that big catch on 3rd down and get upfield and get the 1st down in a big moment like that, I think that speaks super, super highly to him and his competitive character, that he was able to make that play in that moment. And after what was, it's been obviously a very short Tennessee career from him. He didn't play much last year, but was certainly by far the worst game he's played to this point.
Yeah, and I think it says too that like it's just been those 3. Travis Smith played 1 snap. Radarius Jackson obviously injured. It's just been those 3 guys, and at the same time, it doesn't feel like at any of the games so far, which it's really only been 3 that they've had to finish the games. They don't seem to get gassed either. Like they're having really strong finishes to games, as you just talked about the Braylon Staley 3rd down. He just lowers his shoulder and somehow fights for that 1st down. Mike Matthews made a great play on that drive as well. Then obviously on 4th down, Chris Brazel. A great throw by Joey Aguilar with the defense in his face, but it was debatably an even better catch from Chris Brazel, having kind of turned around and somehow track that down on a 4th down that could have decided the game. So all 3 guys have played well down the stretch. The biggest thing to me too is just Chris Brazel's hands this year. Like he just catches anything in the zip code, it feels like, through contact. Ricky brought up the great play, but even the one that was the pass interference, like it's a tough job to track that ball down. And obviously it helps when you're like 6'5", 6'6", and towering over all these defensive backs while still matching their speed. But just his ability to come down with seemingly everything that's thrown up to him is a big deal. And like there's maybe not a play I hate in football more than a goal line fade. I don't know. That might work with like Chris Brazel might come down with that more often.
Yeah.
Like that. I'm curious if that's something they go to in the goal line, because he's just so much bigger than everyone on the field, and now seemingly has some of the best hands in the country. Like that could be a play that works as much as I hate it.
Yeah. He can catch a ball 10 feet in the air, if he needed to. That's
he could probably reverse windmill. Like he has long wingspan, tall for like he is an athletic freak, and it's coming together for him this year.
He might be able to dunk from the free throw line.
He's like, I made the joke on Chase's podcast last night. He's got like the wingspan, the catch radius of like the Monstars when they're I guess it's actually Michael Jordan when the Monstars are dragging him back from half court. That's what it feels like. He's got the wingspan and the catch radius of.
Shump, let me ask you this: just through these first 5 games, again, we all thought that Tennessee would be 4-1 as we sit here in the bye week. Maybe a little bit different than how we expected it to happen. Not that any of the games were in reverse, but just sort of the way that some of those games shook out. Does this change your expectations for where Tennessee might finish in the season? I think we all picked 10-2, a little bit of a different route to get there.
9-3.
We all picked 9-3.
Oh, excuse me. We all picked 9-3. Tennessee's got Arkansas, at Alabama, at Kentucky, home against OU, home against New Mexico State, at Florida, and home against Vanderbilt to close out the season. Does it sort of change your expectations? And I do think that part of this conversation, again, goes back to where you started this whole Tennessee conversation, saying that the SEC, the parity in the league, has been better than it ever has, at least that I've seen. You look at that Vanderbilt team down there at the beginning of the year. Well, it doesn't really matter how I feel about Tennessee. I feel like Vanderbilt is a better team than I expected them to be at this point. You look at Oklahoma. John Mateer is seemingly going to be out leading into that game. Does Oklahoma get John Mateer back and he make his true return against Tennessee and Neyland Stadium? Does he come back before? Does he come back after? There are some things that are hard to predict, but I feel like you have to kind of factor into this conversation that the league as a whole is all over this place right now. And so it kind of is tricky. But, how do you kind of settle in as Tennessee hits this first bye week?
Yeah, I think I would still pick them to go 9-3. But before the season, I felt like I was searching for what that fourth loss is going to be. Like I felt like they were more of an 8-4 team with a 9-3 schedule. Now, I definitely feel like they're closer to 10-2 than they are 8-4. And some of that's the nature of the beast. Georgia felt like perhaps their hardest game, at least one of their two hardest games, and Mississippi State felt like a game they were going to get tripped up by a team that was worse than them. It felt like Mississippi State was the one that could certainly do it. So, I would lean 9-3. Just because I think that Alabama game is going to be really tough to win, and then I think there's a number of other losable games on the schedule. But it certainly wouldn't surprise me either if Tennessee goes 10-2. I would, if Tennessee doesn't go 9-3, I think 10-2 is the next most likely result.
I'll do it. 10-2, making the playoffs for Tennessee this year. I'll give them the extra win. As much as the Swamp has been a house of horrors for Tennessee, it's just so hard for me right now to see Florida having any of the wheels left on that bus by the time Tennessee gets there. Like, they just seem like a disaster waiting to happen. They had a bye week this past week. I think it could be telling what that team looks like this week. I don't know who they play off the top of my head. Is it Texas or something like that? I don't think it's an easy game for them. I mean, it's pretty much SEC play now for everyone. I am curious who they play.
Mississippi State, I believe, plays Texas this week.
They play at A&M, so A&M looks really good. I'm a week in the future. Timeout. They play Texas. Yeah, they host Texas and then they go to Texas A&M. That could be the end of the Billy Napier era. They could get slaughtered in both of those games, and then I don't know what you do from there if you're Florida, because at that point your season's pretty much over now. Your season is completely down the drain if you don't even look competitive in either of those games. So for that said, I like Tennessee in the Swamp. I'm not going to back off. My Alabama is not as good as everyone's saying take, even though they did look really good against Georgia and Ty Simpson looked awesome. I'm not going to back off of it. One game's not going to change my mind. What game they lose, I don't know. We'll see what happens. Maybe it is in Florida. Maybe it is in Alabama. We'll see. But Tennessee's finishing 10-2 and they're making the playoffs.
Right now,
can't do it.
Can't lose it. Can't lose it.
Yes,
We've said it every
truly,
week.
you really
No
can't.
drinks.
Florida looks
We've
awful.
said it.
You can't. You're never
every
winning there if you don't win
single
this
week.
year.
Yeah. Normally we write about this, but we'll go ahead and say it right here on the show. Heather Dinich of ESPN typically writes kind of like if the college football playoffs were to happen right now, where would each team be ranked? Tennessee, for a lot of this season so far, has been in the would-be-in category, but you also can't deny some impressive wins from Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Oklahoma. They've got Alabama and Georgia. Those are the 5 teams who would be in, according to Heather Dinich. On the cusp is LSU, and then Tennessee falls back to that work-to-do category. I think some of that is just because of the way that the schedule has been laid out so far. Excuse me, I'm battling sneezes all of a sudden. Tennessee's got the quality loss to Georgia, but they don't have a rank, they don't have another ranked game like some of these other teams have played so far. Those are those are coming in the future, obviously, going to Alabama, hosting Oklahoma, and then Vanderbilt at the end of the season as well. So right now, they don't have Tennessee in that race, but that's not all too surprising. Just again, because of the way that the schedule has been laid out for each team. So we'll see, but I actually tend to, agree with Sylvia here. That Oklahoma game, I know we all picked Tennessee, or I know we picked Tennessee to win that one. That one continues to just be interesting. With John Mateer's status and everything that goes into it that way. Boy, that Alabama game, I still think is going to be tough. But then, again, it's all going to kind of shake out with that Florida game at the end of the season. So, lot of interesting kind of wrinkles still left on Tennessee's schedule to get through the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, if the playoffs started today, I wouldn't like Tennessee shouldn't be in the playoffs if it started today, but they played 6 more SEC games for a reason. So
Yeah.
I still think the bar's 10-2. If Tennessee can finish 10-2, it's going to be so tough to leave an SEC team that's 10-2 out of the playoffs. We'll see what everyone else looks like and what the records finish at, but 10 wins seems like the bar in the 12-team playoff, at least in the SEC.
Yeah, Notre Dame losing another game would be big. That's the one I'll continue to worry about for Tennessee.
I think that's fair. There's just a handful of teams out there that could play spoiler, I guess, and then you have to see. I mean, the SEC is going to eat itself up, but does that mean that there's instead of 2 12-0 teams, is there just a bunch of 10-2 teams instead of 9-3? Like, it's just curious how the records finish out. But I mean, to control your own destiny, obviously you want to win out. But to me, you can't ask much more than 10 wins after losing that Georgia game.
I also think the Virginia win over Florida State's big. Like you could see the path to the ACC with like Florida State and Miami, and whether that be SMU or Georgia Tech, like some of these teams that just don't all play each other, and I do think the top of that league is better than it's not the very top, but the top group, like 5 deep, they're better than they've been, and a lot of those teams just don't play each other. You worry about some of them kind of avoiding each other, weaving and bobbing, kind of to an extent what happened last year, where 2 of them end up getting in. I think Florida losing that game, or Florida State losing that game to Virginia, helps you kind of avoid that situation. And Clemson just going complete free fall also helps, because Clemson's the type of program that gets the benefit of the doubt when things are borderline. I'm not sure anyone else, maybe Miami, just as a brand, and they've been a little bit better, would get the benefit of the doubt, but I'm not sure anybody else in that conference really will.
Yeah. To that point, I mean, you keep going down Heather Dinnich's article, and the Big Ten's got 3 teams in. The ACC only has 2 teams in. And that is Florida State and Miami, right? And I think Florida State, still at this point, maybe that's looking at them as the conference champion, because I believe ESPN Analytics had them under 12% to make the playoffs. So there's still a lot to play out the rest of the season, but I think that some of these other conference teams have really kind of put themselves behind the 8 ball with some of these losses already. I think this is going to be an SEC dominant playoff bracket. But again, we'll see how the SEC kind of takes care of itself, and who comes out of the bloodbath and just the thrashing that is going to be this conference's schedule for the remainder of the season. So, boy, but does that make it fun to be an SEC fan? Obviously, I know the people listening to this are going to be wanting Tennessee to come out unscathed and things of that nature. But I just think you're going to see some wild moments, for the rest of the conference slate. And boy, I have no idea, who's going to come out of the pack on top. LSU does not look as good as maybe we thought they did. Ole Miss, it seemingly looks great. They could be a contender. Georgia, getting a little bit exposed in certain ways against Alabama, and then the Crimson Tide coming back from who many people said was the graveyard. So there's just so much to kind of get into. And then Oklahoma, obviously, with John Mateer being out for a while, do they slip up with a couple of games? Texas has a fairly easy schedule for the rest of the season compared to other teams in the conference. So just a lot at play here with the Southeastern Conference.
I'll say 2 things on Tennessee's playoff hopes real quick. One, I think they really need Missouri to get caught a couple times. I don't think Missouri's that great, but they just don't like, they're similar to Tennessee, where if there is a team that plays an easier SEC slate this year, it's probably Missouri. So they just need Missouri.
I think statistically that was the only one going into the season, was that it was Missouri at 16, Tennessee at 15.
So that's what would worry me if I was Tennessee and you're trying to compete with other 10-2 teams. Trying to get Missouri out of the picture, I think is going to end up being a little critical. The other thing is, though, Shumper talked about benefit of the doubt for like a Clemson. I think Tennessee's earned themselves a little bit of a benefit of a doubt if they get to 10-2. You were in the playoffs last year. You didn't look good in the playoffs last year, but they've completely overhauled the offense. Obviously, we've all talked about that. But the storyline, too. What a storyline for Tennessee.
It's true.
That does play an impact, I think, when you're doing a man-made committee that's picking teams. Like the fact that you lost your quarterback and the offense is better and this and that. Tennessee goes 10-2. Once again, it's all talk and none of it actually really matters until you see the final records and resumes. But to me, it's really, really tough for me to see Tennessee going 10-2, being left out. It remains the bar. Tennessee has one more game to mess up. After that, I don't think anyone's making it 9-3 in the SEC this year, unless obviously it really eats itself alive. But As of now, 10-2, like I said, that's the bar.
Yep.
All right. Anything else on the way out? Obviously, we'll no podcast over the weekend with Tennessee being on the open date, and then we'll come back next Wednesday, I would assume, and get things started back rolling with a preview for the Arkansas game. But a good lot to talk about today as Tennessee enters their first of 2 bye weeks. And again, I just say I'm very excited to have an off week myself this weekend. Just sit back and relax. The cowbells are still ringing in my ear. Those things were just a mess to deal with. I mean, they were not. I'm talking about from a me perspective, not an atmosphere perspective, not a player perspective. They were a lot to deal with for me personally. They were ringing and a dinging all game long.
Not enough responsible ringing.
No, they weren't. It wasn't the most responsible ringing I've ever seen. I will say, I talked my junk about Mississippi State's atmosphere on the post game. It's addictive, though. You really want to pick one up and start ringing it. When they start ringing, you really want to pick one up and start ringing. I don't care. So it is addictive.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly.
I wish I had come home with one.
I know.
I wish I had figured out how to get one at the game. It's just like a souvenir, you know.
When I was walking,
I feel like they're pretty expensive.
Probably.
When I was walking,
The nice ones.
I saw they have like the in stadium, like, pop-up shops. I saw some cowbells. And I was like, man, if this was open right now, I might have to pull up the credit card and buy a cowbell just to have one. But
I would have done it. I
first
100% would have done it.
It's tradition. Your first cowbell is supposed to be from a Mississippi State alumni. If it's not, it's bad luck. And I don't know if the vendor.
I don't care about giving them bad luck.
Well,
is it me giving them bad luck, or is it me giving the things around me bad luck?
It's Rick Butler bad luck. So you got to find an alumni to buy it from.
Yeah, you probably can't just like order one of Amazon. Would probably be like the worst luck possible. Like maybe going into like the school store, is like just a little bit of bad luck. Like an Amazon cowbell feels like it would just be, a curse.
I think if you're in Starkville, the odds that the resident there is a Mississippi State alum is pretty high.
Yeah, but that's not a hand-me-down. That's just who's ringing up your order at the cashier stand.
Yeah, but I think if someone's living in Starkville and working in Mississippi State, the odds that they went to Mississippi State are relatively high.
Yeah.
So I think it would have been a safe call. Better than like an Amazon cowbell, for sure.
Yeah, better than that. All right. Anything else on the way out from either of you?
Nope.
Don't look like it. All right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this thing up, though, and get it out to the public. Man, we got so much going on at Rocky Top Insider right now. Let me also just say this. For anybody who has been clicking on the articles online, who's been interacting with us on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, obviously we can't say how much, but it has been an unbelievable run for Rocky Top Insider here over the last couple months, and this football season has been strong. So we are extremely grateful for all the support that we've had, again, in any sort of medium that you could have, both online, on the YouTube, on social media, anything like that. We're thrilled about it. We really are, and we couldn't do it without everybody who is clicking and who is listening and who is watching everything that we have to do. My dog is like 6 feet away from me snoring right now, so I hope that's not being picked up. I'm going to try to wake her up with my voice. Either way, go ahead and continue subscribe. If you're watching this show on the YouTube account right now, go ahead and like and subscribe. That would help us out a ton. But if you subscribe, you got a ton of content coming your way. You got post-game shows. You got post-game press conferences. You got weekly press conferences. You've got the opponent press conference, everything along those lines. It's a great place to be. Plus, Pancakes and Bacon and the RTI Lowdown, which comes out on Sunday nights at 8 o'clock p.m. on Rocky Top Insider YouTube and wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Big episode this weekend. I can't stress it enough. Lot coming up on the radar. I'm not going to spoil it. I don't even know if I'm allowed to spoil it right now, but it is going to be a big episode that you will not want to miss. It is going to be a fun one, no doubt about it, as we get ready for Arkansas next week. If you want to follow Ryan Shumpert, you can do that at rshump00. If you want to follow Ryan Sylvia, you can do that at Ryan T. Sylvia. Our good friend Jack Foster is over at Jack Foster Media, and myself at Rick_Butler. But of course, just make sure you're checking out at Rocky Top Insider on all social media platforms and RockyTopInsider.com each and every day. Hey, thanks so much for listening to a bit of an extended episode of the RTI Press Pass today. Man, as we get into the bye week this weekend, and then we got a preview next weekend for Arkansas with the new interim head hog, Bobby Petrino, leading the Razorbacks into Neyland Stadium. Should be a fun one. Thanks so much for listening to the show today. For Ryan Shumpert, for Ryan Sylvia, I'm Rick Butler. Thanks for listening to the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass Podcast.